There are four characters in this passage I'm going to read. It's going to start from the beginning of the book. The first is Sati, and I've already told you he is a historical character. He's mentioned one time in the Buddhist scriptures, but he's mentioned in this really dramatic way as being not understanding the Buddhist teaching and the son of a fisherman. I have made him here a young boy. I mean, he was 16, 17 years old when he came into the monastery. That's what I say. We don't know that. And we don't know that he lived in Kosambi. He probably didn't. But that's where I placed him, because I thought I can build a story around that. The second one is a monk named Chandana. And he was a historical character. We don't know his name, because you'll see why. A lot of issues developed around him. This schism developed around him. He's described here, so I won't say more, but again, we don't know his name. The third one was also a monk named Harika, and again, we don't know his name, but there was somebody there who was pretty much like this guy. And then the fourth one was another monk, and his name was Migajala. He's a fictional character that I made up. Migajala becomes pretty much of a toady. He's really connected with Harika in a very strong way. And I will say that Sati and Chandana, the first two, Sati takes Chandana as mentor, and more than a mentor, he really, because Sati's an orphan, relies on Chandana. So that sets the stage. The story begins and pretty much is situated in 446 BC. The leaves dance in the light breeze, casting a fluttering shadow around his feet in the little grove of rosewood trees known as Simsapa. Although it is only February 23rd, the weather in Kosambi is turning hot early this year, 446 BC. Already everything is going dry and brown. Some of the leaves, delicately heart-shaped, have begun to fall. Others will live on for another season, but have lost the brightness of youth. Sati isn't noticing color, however. He's entranced by the shadowy movement. It occurs to him that the leaves are bearing quivering witness to their common fate. Sati's large eyes, which are usually bright with intelligence, take on a remote cast. At 17, he is slightly taller than average, with a strong body and a broad, sensitive face, a fair complexion, and regular features. If he had hair, it would swirl in a small colic atop his forehead, but his head is shaven, for he is a novice in the Buddha's order. Sati is escaping boredom. He's supposed to be meditating. That's what monks do at this time of day, after the noonday meal, after a nap if they are inclined. Now is the time for a long afternoon of meditation. Sati envisions the good monks of the monastery sitting cross-legged on meditation mats on their small porches. It's too hot to sit inside. All deeply immersed in mindfulness or bliss or some other heavenly state. Not him. Sati's thoughts simply will not cooperate with his intentions. Ignoring his repeated admonitions, they run every which way like panicky ants whose hill has been leveled. It's been going on like this all afternoon, and Sati is worn out. He's tired of futile efforts. Why did he ever think of becoming a monk? So it was a relief to notice the need for a little trip to the latrine. A break. Sati happily takes his time now, dawdling in his favorite part of the monastery, the Sinsapa grove, watching the dancing leaves and their shadows flitting over the forest floor, which is covered with generations of leathery fallen ones. Sati doesn't realize, as he stands there, that his thoughts have dropped into a natural accord with the woody environment, becoming quieter than they were when he tried to still them in meditation this afternoon. Now, as if from a distance, a growing inner pressure nudges him out of his reverie and brings him back to the matter at hand. I could do it here, he thinks, right here in the grove. Nobody would know. His hand on a gray-brown trunk of a mature tree, its bark peeling in narrow strips, he envisions squatting and peeing. But Sati is aware that if peeing everywhere were common practice, the smell in the monastic park during the dry season would be overpowering. There's a rule against it. He shakes his head ruefully. Rules. Always rules. Sati acknowledges the need for them if you're going to live in community. However, the profusion of restrictions governing all aspects of monastic life, major and minor, is a continual aggravation. The no peeing in the park rule makes sense, but a lot of them don't, not as far as he can see anyway. Well, there's no rule against complaining to myself. Or is there? He smiles wryly at that one and continues on his way to the latrine. Urgency makes him pick up his pace now, though he still walks with mindful restraint, as befits a monk, a bhikkhu. Another rule. A bhikkhu should walk with dignity. Well, he thinks not exactly a rule, but certainly a strict protocol. We do it like this and not like that. It's one of those. Will I ever remember them all? The venerable Megajala flashes into his mind. He seems to observe the nuances of the discipline naturally, even though he's only been ordained 8 months. Like a fish in water, Sati grumbles. How does the man manage it? He throws a quick prayer to the Buddha for help in his own sad case, but he's doubtful. Rules don't suit him. A movement ahead makes Sati stop on the path. The venerables Megajala and Harika are standing in the covered entryway to the latrine. I was just thinking about you, Sati observes silently, looking at Megajala. The pair is whispering, their heads together like conspirators. It's clear who is dominant. At 26, small and thin, Megajala is looking at the ground and listening intently, while the venerable Harika gesticulates and speaks vigorously, though softly. Harika is 31, and having been ordained for 5 years, he's one of the more senior bhikkhus in the young order, where monastic rank depends on the date of ordination. All in all, his body is unremarkable. You hardly notice it. That's because Harika hardly notices it himself. Of medium height and build, he is round-shouldered, as though hunched under the weight of a great hoard of thoughts. Indeed, Harika views his body as a mere conveyance for his intellect, which, if questioned, he would assert is located in his heart, because everybody knows that the brain is simply the marrow of the skull. Well, no matter. Wherever it resides, Harika's intellect is his master, and right now, from Sati's perspective, it seems to be communicating important information to the younger monk. The two are so engrossed they don't notice Sati. After a moment, the novice instinctively ducks behind the trunk of an old simsapa that stands just before the clearing. What are they about? Something's wrong. It's more than unseemly for monks to conspire, but for all the world that's what they seem to be doing. Then a brief inner caution. Uh-oh, judgment, Sati, you're making a judgment. And look who's being conspiratorial. Me, hiding behind a tree. Talk about unseemly. But he stands there anyway, his eyes riveted on the pair. Sati trusts his intuition. He watches Harika walk over to a low shelf in the entryway and pick up one of the 4 gourds that are used as water jars. Harika turns to the cistern nearby, takes off a lid, and tips it to allow a small stream of water to flow into the vessel. In silence, too, Harika holds the gourd aloft, showing it to Megajala as though it were a trophy. His usually grim features break into a smile. It isn't a friendly smile. A slight nod of understanding passes between them. Then the younger monk turns and leaves. Sati stiffens and takes a small step further behind the tree's hospitable trunk, hoping Megajala won't notice him. He can't move further around because he'd be in Harika's line of vision. Walking quickly and full of purpose, Megajala doesn't notice. The young man exhales in relief. But Harika is still to come, and he's more observant. Sati watches, holding his breath again, while Harika waits a few moments, then follows. Sati inches back around the trunk as Harika comes on, careful not to trip over a young sucker growing from the tree's root. He dearly hopes the crunch of leaves underfoot as he moves out of sight won't draw the venerable's attention. Harika walks slowly in an upright monkly manner, and he carries a half-full gourd with him. He doesn't notice Sati. Once Harika disappears around the turn in the path, Sati emerges from his hiding place. Not a moment too soon. A good deal of time has passed since he left his hut on this mission, and his kidneys are now signaling an all-out emergency. He dashes into the latrine, grinning at his unseemly pace, but his heart is beating rapidly. Something important is about to happen. He can't imagine what, but he senses it won't be for the better. He'll follow and find out. First, however, bodily need. As Sati walks into the common area, he hears a commotion, an area where silence customarily prevails, even when all 24 monks are in residence, is now clamorous with voices. "What do you mean you emptied the water jar?" the venerable Harika is shouting almost. "You deny it? Here it is. Here, half full," shaking the gourd in the face of a somewhat older monk. He turns to the circle of monks that has formed around them and, holding the jar aloft, slowly passes it before the gaze of the bhikkhus. Then, certain he has their attention, he pours the water onto the ground. "You weren't mindful, friend. It's plain and simple. It's a breach of discipline, a serious breach." As though on cue, Migajala begins to gesticulate. His voice soaring to a high register, he interjects, "Venerable sir, I didn't pass you on the path, and I was at the lavatory too, and the venerable Harika was there, and he found the water jar just as you left it shortly before. It was still half full, and—" He pauses for a much-needed breath. The gathered bhikkhus are wide-eyed. What in the world is going on? Harika, even in his presumed rage, notes that Migajala is blundering into the histrionic. No subtlety there at all. Harika doesn't give a thought to his own histrionics. Migajala resumes his rehearsed script, still waving his hands, fingers apart, palms up, to underscore the rage. And we all know the cleanliness rule, the one that states— "Yes, yes, friend, we do know that protocol," interrupts the venerable Chandana, quietly, but careful not to call it a rule. "Which is, of course, why I emptied the remaining water on a plant at the edge of the path. As always," he adds for good measure. Chandana stands still and upright as he speaks. "I did not forget," he concludes with soft finality. The venerable Chandana is a tall, well-built man in his mid-40s, his complexion light, his features regular, animated by both strength and kindliness. He has a natural dignity that some attribute to his Brahmanic birth and to the privilege of upbringing in a wealthy family. But his training in the Buddha's Dhamma, or teaching, runs deep, and Chandana has dropped identification with his past. He is a noble one in the true sense, in the order where nobility refers to spiritual attainment, not birth. Learned in the teaching, the Dhamma, as well as in the rules and protocols of the discipline, he has the flexible mind of one who has learned to see things as they truly are, and who possesses the common sense to act on them wisely. His inner ease translates into ease of relationships with others. "Are you calling me a liar, friend?" Harika hurls back in rage. His eyes, which are his most outstanding physical feature, are copper. Sometimes they're the color of his robes. Now they glint like metal. "No, friend, I'm not calling you a liar," Chandana responds softly, drawing out the word friend for emphasis. The irony, though ignored, is not lost on Harika, nor on the clutch of observers. "I'm not calling you a liar, but clearly there's been a mistake." "Words," shoots back Harika. "Mistake, lie, what's the difference? This vessel says you forgot, and you're denying it because you don't want to admit that you lapsed in the discipline. A monk who doesn't honor the discipline—" Chandana holds his head askance and looks hard at Harika as he runs on. What is this man about? His speech itself is a lapse of monastic decorum, not to mention a lapse in simple truth and kindness. Angry words are unwise speech, and the tongue that speaks them is an axe in the mouth. The Buddha teaches that. If Harika thinks I forgot to empty the gourd and feels it even worthy of comment, such a ridiculous and such a trivial event, he should talk to me privately, not in front of our brothers. Though Chandana doesn't put it past Harika to be angered by any disciplinary breach, even a trivial one, his words are wildly disproportionate to the occasion. A water jar? Chandana senses that not anger, but design drives the monk. Harika is deliberately creating a scene. who knows what's going on in that devious mind?